All right, so Kash Patel. You might have heard the name, maybe not. But either way, this guy's story, it's, well, it's pretty wild.
Yeah, it's not your typical rise to the top kind of thing.
Exactly. I mean, we're talking about someone who started as a public defender in Florida and ends up as, get this, President-elect Trump's pick to lead the FBI. Like, how does that even happen?
Well, it's interesting, right? You start with his parents. Indian immigrants settled in Garden City, New York. Seems pretty normal, right?
Small town, quiet life, that kind of thing.
Yeah, but then you look at Patel's early career, and it's just this crazy mix of experiences.
Public defender, right.
Yeah.
And not just any cases. We're talking international drug trafficking,
Right.
even murder. Pretty intense stuff.
Heavy stuff, yeah.
Yeah.
And you don't usually see that kind of background on someone heading for, the FBI director's office.
No, not at all. It's like, what did those years as a public defender teach him?
Well, I guess it gave him a pretty deep understanding of the criminal justice system, but from a different angle. Seeing the complexities, the challenges people face when they're accused of crimes.
And then, boom, he switches sides completely, becomes a federal prosecutor, but specifically focused on national security.
Total 180, yeah. Shows ambition, that's for sure. And a willingness to jump into new things, tough things.
So as a prosecutor, he's dealing with, what, threats to the nation, terrorism, espionage.
That kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And honestly, that's what lays the groundwork for him getting involved in national security at the highest levels later on.
Okay, so this guy's not afraid of a challenge, that's clear.
Yeah.
But then he goes even further, right? He dives headfirst into politics, becomes a key aide to Congressman Devin Nunes.
Big name in the Trump world for sure. And this is where things get really interesting, especially if you're following the whole Trump era saga.
Oh, yeah, because Patel gets super involved in those investigations into Trump and Russian interference in the 2016 election.
Deeply involved, yeah. And a big part of that is the Nunes memo.
Okay, hold on. The Nunes memo, some people might not remember all the details on that. Can you break it down? What was it? Why was it such a big deal?
Sure. So basically, the memo was alleging that the FBI had messed up, acted improperly, when they got a warrant to surveil Carter Page, who was a former Trump campaign advisor.
Right.
The memo claimed the FBI used info from the Steele dossier.
Funded by the Democrats, right?
Yep. At least partly. So the whole thing fueled accusations that the FBI was biased against Trump, trying to undermine him.
So basically, it poured gasoline on that whole Russia investigation fire that was already burning.
Precisely. Suddenly, it's not just about Russia. It's about whether the investigation itself was legitimate, politically motivated, all that.
And opinions were super divided on the memo, weren't they?
Oh, absolutely. Some people saw it as like a smoking gun, proof of a conspiracy. Others said it was just a partisan hack job trying to protect Trump and discredit the FBI.
So even this early on, Patel's already wading into some seriously controversial stuff.
No doubt. And I think the memo really shows something about how he approaches things. He's willing to challenge what everyone else thinks, take on powerful institutions if he believes they're doing something wrong.
Some people might call that brave. Others might call it reckless. Depends on your perspective, I guess.
It really does. And I think that willingness to shake things up, well, it caught Trump's attention. That's when Patel's career takes this, meteoric rise.
Yeah, from there, he's basically on the fast track within the Trump administration.
Yeah.
National Security Council, Office of the Director of National Intelligence.
Important role.
Big time. And he even becomes Chief of Staff to the Acting Secretary of Defense.
These aren't just, backroom positions. He's trusted by Trump, given serious responsibilities.
He's clearly in the inner circle at this point. But it's interesting, his rise coincides with some of the most politically chaotic times. Tons of controversy swirling around.
Yeah, and Patel's name doesn't stay out of those controversies. Remember the whole Trump-Ukraine scandal? Phone records showed he was talking to Rudy Giuliani.
Giuliani, Trump's personal lawyer, right.
Right, and Giuliani was doing his own digging into Joe Biden and his son in Ukraine at the time.
Oh, so Patel's right in the thick of it again. What was he even doing there?
Well, that sort of things get a little murky. Patel's denied being part of Giuliani's efforts to, find dirt on Biden. Says his calls were just personal.
But some people find that hard to believe, right?
Totally. Critics say there's no way he was completely oblivious to what Giuliani was up to.
It goes back to that question. Is he brave or is he reckless? Challenging things for the right reasons or playing fast and loose with the rules?
Yeah, and that's a question that's super important to understanding who Kash Patel is. What kind of FBI director would he even be?
Because his supporters will point to his legal background, national security experience, his loyalty. They say those are qualifications.
They'll say he gets things done, isn't afraid to shake things up when things need shaking.
But then his critics, they'll say he's too partisan, too connected to Trump.
That he might use the FBI for political purposes, not just for justice.
It's a debate that's definitely going to keep going as this whole nomination thing plays out.
For sure.
So what we've seen so far is a pretty fascinating path, wouldn't you say? From public defender to federal prosecutor to now potentially head of the FBI. It's not your everyday career trajectory.
Nope, definitely not. And along the way, he's racked up some impressive accomplishments, but also, like we said, generated a whole lot of controversy.
And that's where things get really interesting.
Yeah.
We've laid out the background, but now we got to dig deeper, and we want to hear from you, the listeners.
Exactly. What stands out to you about Patel's career? What parts resonate with you, make you think? Share your thoughts, your opinions, because this is a conversation that needs to happen.
Absolutely. We want to know what you think.
And it doesn't stop there, right? After leaving the Trump administration, Patel, he really embraces this role as like a true Trump loyalist.
Oh, yeah, totally. It's like he doubles down on supporting Trump and his whole narrative of what went down during those years.
Exactly. And one of the clearest examples of this is his children's book. It's called The Plot Against the King.
Okay, wait, a children's book.
Yeah, but it's basically retelling the Trump-Russia investigation, but as a fairy tale.
Interesting. So Trump's the king, I'm guessing?
Of course. And his opponents, they're the villains trying to steal the crown.
Wow. Okay, so a children's book about political intrigue. What's the message there?
Well, on the surface, it's good versus evil, right? Simple.
Sort of classic fairy tale stuff.
But look closer, and it's pushing a very specific view of the Russia investigation. Trump as the victim of this, like, deep state conspiracy.
So kind of sneaking in those ideas to a younger audience, shaping how they see things.
Exactly. It's pretty clever when you think about it.
Definitely a unique way to get people thinking about those events. But it also shows Patel's good at getting his message across, right?
Oh, absolutely. He's a skilled communicator, no doubt, whether it's through legal arguments, political speeches, even children's books. He finds a way to connect with people.
But he doesn't just talk.
Right.
He takes action, too. Starts this charity called Fight with Cash. Seems like a positive thing on the surface.
Yeah, helping people, all that. But there's been some pushback, questions about the real motives behind it.
So some people are saying it's less about helping people and more about pushing a political agenda.
Exactly. Critics say he's using it to target people he sees as enemies of Trump.
So is it genuine or is it a political play? Tough to say for sure.
Yeah, tough call. But it's something to think about when you're trying to figure out what kind of guy Patel is, what drives him.
Absolutely. And then there's those comments he made on Steve Bannon's podcast talking about revenge, I think was the word he used, against political enemies, the media, if Trump won again.
Oh, yeah, that raised some eyebrows.
Not exactly reassuring, right? Especially if he's going to be in charge of the FBI.
No, it brings up some concerns. It's like, is he going to use law enforcement for personal reasons, political vendettas? That's dangerous territory.
Big time. Makes you wonder, can he separate his loyalty to Trump from his duty to the law, to the Constitution?
A big question. And if he does become FBI director, will he go after Trump's opponents? Or will he be fair, impartial?
Those are some serious questions we got to think about. But to be fair, we got to look at both sides, right? His supporters say he's the right guy for the job because he's willing to challenge things.
Yeah, they see him as a strong leader, someone who can take on the so-called deep state, expose corruption in the government.
They might say his fighting spirit is what's needed to fix the FBI, which they think has become too political, weaponized against conservatives.
It's a valid viewpoint, for sure. But it also raises concerns. Will he put one party's interests above justice, above the rule of law?
It's a tough one. So here we are, the big question. Is Kash Patel qualified to lead the FBI? No easy answers there.
Nope. It's complicated. On one hand, look at his resume. Strong legal background, tons of experience in national security, knows how Washington works.
He's obviously smart, not afraid of tough situations.
Right.
And his supporters say his unique path, his willingness to break the mold, that's what the FBI needs.
But then you have his critics. They're worried about his lack of experience in, like, traditional law enforcement.
Right, not your typical cop on the beat.
Exactly. And his close ties to Trump, all the controversies he's been involved in, those are red flags.
They're afraid he'll be too partisan, too willing to bend the rules, too aggressive. They think the FBI could become a tool for revenge, not for justice.
It's a real concern. So where does that leave us? It's a tough call, honestly.
Valid points on both sides.
It comes down to how you judge his character, his motives. Can he lead the FBI fairly, impartially?
That's where you, the listeners, come in. What do you think? Is Patel qualified to be a head of the FBI?
Share your thoughts. Join the conversation. This is important stuff, folks. The future of the FBI, the integrity of our justice system, it could all depend on this decision.
It's a lot to take in, right?
Huh.
Patel's journey, I mean. From public defender to, well, smack dab in the middle of some of the biggest political fights we've seen.
Absolutely.
And now, here we are, asking, what if he actually becomes the head of the FBI? What then?
Yeah, the million-dollar question. And honestly, no easy answer, no way to predict the future perfectly.
Right.
But we can look at what we know, right? His actions, what he said, what he believes, and maybe make some educated guesses.
Okay, so let's speculate a little.
Yeah.
If Patel's in charge of the FBI, what changes? What's he going to focus on?
Well, if you ask his supporters, they'll say he'll bring accountability. They'll say he's not afraid to shake things up, take on the bureaucracy, root out corruption, even if it makes people mad.
And they'd probably point back to that whole Nunes memo thing.
Oh, absolutely. Proof that he's willing to challenge the system, expose wrongdoing, even in powerful institutions.
And they'd also say his national security background is a big plus.
Huge. Especially now with all the threats out there, terrorism, foreign stuff. They'd say he's the guy for the job, knows what he's doing.
So to them, Patel's a strong leader. Someone who can make the FBI trustworthy again, make it better at protecting the country.
Exactly. But then you have his critics. They'd paint a much different picture.
Oh, yeah.
They'd say he's going to be obsessed with going after Trump's enemies, that the FBI will become a weapon, not a protector.
And I bet they'd bring up those revenge comments.
Oh, for sure. As proof that he'll use the FBI for personal reasons to get back at people. That's scary stuff.
Seriously scary. And they'd also point out he doesn't have that traditional law enforcement experience.
Right. Not your typical cop working his way up the ranks.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the FBI, it's a complicated machine, right? Lots of responsibilities, organized crime, cybercrime, all sorts of things.
And they'd say you need to know all of it to lead effectively, something Patel might not have.
It's a valid point. Yeah. And then there's the bigger picture, right? The FBI has been pulled into politics more and more lately. Accusations of bias from both sides.
It's a tough spot. The director needs to be someone who can stay above the politics, restore trust.
Big shoes to fill. So, is Kash Patel that person? Can he separate his loyalty to Trump from his duty to, the Constitution, the American people?
That's the question, isn't it? And it's not an easy one.
Definitely not. But here's what we do know. The FBI, it's a crucial part of our democracy. Protects our rights, upholds the law, keeps us safe.
Absolutely.
So no matter what you think of Kash Patel, we got to have these conversations about the future of the FBI, its role in our society.
What kind of FBI do we want? One that's a political tool or one that's independent, focused on justice?
Those are questions worth thinking about for sure. And we hope you'll keep exploring them, look at different viewpoints, form your own opinions.
Because ultimately, the future of the FBI, it's in our hands.
Well, that's it for our deep dive into Kash Patel. Hope this got you thinking, maybe spark some interesting discussions. Until next time, stay curious, stay engaged, and keep diving deep.